seeing if the algorithm picks me up a little bit. Sue me. I've been trying to catch up on Squid Games. I've been embodying my inner Thanos, biting necks, kicking shit, avoiding forks, running hosers in your deck. Is it okay? Is it cool? Is it bad? Is it overpowered? What is a hoser? Fair. Let's get that out of the way first. A hoser, by definition, is a Canadian slang term for someone... hold on. A hoser, by definition, is a card that prevents a specific thing in the game from occurring. A great example, and the example we're going to be using for this video, is Rest in Peace. This is a 1 and a white enchantment that exiles all cards in all graves when it enters and prevents anything from going to the grave. So this is an absolute graveyard deck hoser. If someone at the table is running a graveyard deck, I think it's pretty safe to say that this one card completely shuts off their deck, aside from maybe some like card draw removal, mana ramp. If someone's running Muldrotha, you don't have a graveyard to go for anymore, and you have nothing to reuse because everything gets exiled. Someone's running Kess, you don't have any spells. Even if you do cast a spell, you don't get to reuse it. Now, this has led a lot of people to believing that like hoser cards just aren't fun. They don't have a place anywhere outside of competitive. And honestly, they're partially correct. Partially. The Command Zone actually talked about this in one of their videos. I think it was cards that they don't run anymore, if I'm not mistaken, where they brought up Rest in Peace specifically as just an unfun card because it completely shuts down graveyard decks. And again, I completely agree with that, but not for the reason you may think. This whole like hoser rabbit hole that I've been going down has led me to a totally different way of viewing deck building that has kind of honestly reignited the spark for like me to want to build decks. I'm probably going to go through all my other decks tonight and do this exact same thing because it was so efficient and improved my time so much. So if you're interested in that, let's get into what that is. Let's talk about hosers, the good kind. Global versus specific. I think context is everything when it comes to these hoser cards. So referring back to the Rest in Peace example, this is an especially mean hoser for 2 reasons. One, it stops an entire strategy from working, which is obviously a little much. It stops things from going into the graveyard, being into the graveyard, which means none of the stuff that gets stuff out of the graveyard works, which is, you know, the whole strategy. Number 2, the strategy that it stops, being Reanimator or graveyard decks, isn't a necessarily oppressive strategy and doesn't inherently counter other strategies at the table. So essentially, you're punishing the graveyard player drastically for no reason, way more harshly than any other player at the table for 2 mana. So to kind of flip this around the other way, for example, if that Reanimator deck in a casual setting were to run Elish Norn, because they're like, hey, that's a big bomb that stops all these little tokens and aggro stuff from getting to me too quick. All the games where they're not against an aggro or token deck, Elish Norn, sure, good, gets removed most of the time, if not just never gets the chance to hit the board anyway. But the 1 or 2 games that there's 2, 3 aggro or token decks at the table, oh, this one card just won me the game. Sorry about you. I didn't mean to absolutely hose your token strategy. And this is a very key, like, nuance to understand. A Wrath of God versus a token deck is going to hose that token deck. It's also going to blow up everything else on the board, and it's not going to specifically target the token deck. Every deck needs some board wipes. An Elish Norn isn't going to wipe the board unless you're the token or aggro deck. So you can do these little gymnastics where you're like, no, Elish Norn's just my board wipe. It's really not. It hoses specific decks, and then it's good the rest of the time. It's not only unfun for the person that has to lose against that, it's also not really an advantage. All those games you're not going against that deck that it hoses, your wins and your losses just feel bad. Your losses are like, yeah, I got this Elish Norn that really didn't do much this game. And your wins are like, hosed your ass. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I want a more consistent deck, personally. A hoser without purpose benefits no one. I think that was Justin Trudeau who said that. Anyway, so like, what are the good kind of hosers then? Hose your hoses. I'm not joking. And honestly, this is such an eye-opener for me deck building wise. Like I said, it's getting me excited to deck build again. So, short little story. I had to make a bittersweet revelation over the past week. Teneb isn't good. He's just bad. He's old, he's slow, he takes an entire rotation, plus combat damage, plus mana, plus the 3 mana to actually reanimate something, plus the 6 mana he costs to play. It's a lot for not that great of an effect. I love him. He's my favorite dragon. He's my bestest boy. He's my first commander. But if I'm being honest with myself and my enjoyment of the game, I wasn't having a good time. That's what leads us into Carador Ghost Chieftain. Although Teneb will stay in my heart forever, like I said, Ghost Chieftain. And also has taught me some like very cool tech that I'd like to share with you. So at first, Ghost Chieftain didn't run very well at all because it was just the old Teneb shell with a new commander and the Teneb deck didn't work. So, you know, This one didn't work. Pair this with one of my friends that we've recently been starting to play Magic with again, building an extremely strong Maelstrom Wanderer deck that at first I was like, that's too strong. Now I'm like, maybe I need to upgrade a little bit. Maybe I need to change how I'm approaching this a little bit. This forced me to take apart my deck for the first time in a while, which was nice because, as you know on the channel, I have a fat stack of cards that I've considered for this deck, and this gave me a little breathing room to ask some questions. One of the first questions that popped into my head, and the reason I made this video, what has been hosing me in my games? The games that I lose, what are the things that are making me lose? So without putting the entire Carador deck tech in the middle of a video, because we are going to have that on the channel soon, my conclusion was my deck was losing for one of 3 reasons. The first reason was aggro creatures that were too fast made my 1 to 2 creature drops a turn way too slow and would already have a win line before I'd even set up. 2, large amounts of counterspells and instant speed removal made my 1 and 2 impactful creature drops useless and also gave the opponents a tempo lead. And number 3, decks that were able to cheat in, ramp out, reanimate any large resilient threats into play too early would just lead to my deck falling behind because I would have to prioritize removing those threats instead of establishing a board state, which just leads to you crawling for the win the whole game. That's when I finally realized, hose your hoses. Don't just hose full strategies. Don't just hose stuff for the sake of it. This card's really good. It stops this entire thing. Yeah, that's really good. Hose the specific little intricacies that are stopping you in the moment. Something to keep in mind about hoser cards is the earlier you can get them out, the better, because a lot of these effects are proactive in trying to prevent something that's going to harm our deck significantly. So, going back to my stack of cards and those 3 questions that I asked myself, I looked for some cards that could answer my problems for the reasons I was losing games. Question 1. How do we stop aggressive creatures from swarming us? Cards like Torrens, First of the Angels, turns all of our early game creatures into more bodies to deter attackers, along with cards like Elas Core, Sadistic Pilgrim, to help us gain life, as well as deter attackers from the drain. Okay, but what about question 2? How do we stop large amounts of removal and responses from stopping our board from sticking? Well, my answer was cards like Kutzil, Melamet, Exemplar to prevent our opponents from casting spells during our turn, like instant speed removal and counter spells, while Boromir prevents board wipes and removal with its indestructible sacrifice ability. Boromir also being pretty good against the aforementioned aggro problem as well. And the final question, how do we not fold to large creature threats and win cons being cheated into play or just looking us dead in the face? My answer to that was cards like Kudo, King Among Bears, which will turn every creature into play into a 2/2, even those Eldrazi's. Emrakul, you're a 2/2 bear, I'm sorry. Still have your abilities, which is still good. Also way better for me that you're not a 15/15. Along with Springleaf Nantuko, but being able to just produce copies of threats we have or just make 1/1s to chump block is extremely good at deterring attacks and keeping us alive. I guess a good name for these would maybe be like mini hosers or something, because they're not hosing a whole strategy, they're hosing the specifics that kind of mess with your strategy. For instance, in my Reanimator deck, I have a problem with other Reanimator decks that are able to cheat out stuff quicker than I am. I could throw a Rest in Peace in there. It would clunk up the works for me 100%. It would also completely negate that problem. Both bad ideas. So instead, I just put in Farika, God of Affliction, because that will remove the specific things that are killing me. I don't have to remove their whole graveyard, just the one thing that's about to get reanimated. This is so cool to me because it opens up, and again, this is probably basic knowledge to a lot of you. I just like to show some of the stuff that I'm learning on the way of trying to get better at deck building and at the game. Find what your hosers are, the things that you're losing to, and then install mini hosers, or whatever you want to call them, into your deck to prevent those things from happening in the game as much as they do. It's really, really useful. It's got me really excited. For instance, your Timir Spellslinger deck, it loses the counter spells. They keep countering your Mnemonic Deluges. They keep countering your Expropriates. Throw in a Vexing Shusher. Now your stuff can't get countered. You get to do that now. Your token deck gets hosed by board wipes. Throw in a Selfless Spirit. Give your whole board indestructible. Your control deck gets hosed by Hexproof and Shroud because you're not able to target. Throw in an Arcane Lighthouse. Make them lose the Shroud and Hexproof. Let's say your mono white deck commander is the backbone of the deck, and if that commander gets countered or removed, the whole deck flops. Even Interrupter has a word to say with you. Those counter spells ain't going to be countering, and you're in mono white, so they will not see it coming. It's extremely fun to find what your little hoser moments are and find your little counter hoser moment cards, if that makes any sense. So, this is a call to action. Get your decks out, figure out what those little things are that are causing you to lose, and then maybe install a couple toolbox pieces into the deck to help you combat those, because I think hosing your hosers is a very good idea for deck building, and it makes a lot of your decks that you might have thought were weak a lot stronger, because you're like, oh, they weren't that weak. It was just this one thing that's a very common occurrence in a Magic game. I just needed to put a tool in for that. But I don't know. I digress. I hope you guys liked the video. I hope it made sense at all to you guys. I am working on something that's a little bit of a bigger project. I have a couple people. I've sent out some things. People are working on some stuff. But the community is going to be involved. So if you'd like to subscribe and share, hit that little bell icon. I never say that, to stay updated, because, you know, one of these weeks we're going to be uploading something that's going to be, I think you guys will like and be excited for. So keep an eye out for that. Like, subscribe, share, comment, do all that stuff. If you want to show a little bit of additional support, like the people over my blurry mug, you can head over to the Patreon, patreon.com/@NixLotus. If that link doesn't work, there's a link in the description and the comments. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Appreciate you.